This week, we will be talking about the fairly new Indigenous Residential School History and Dialogue Centre located in UBC and the significance of it for Indigenous people as well as non-Indigenous public. The centre was opened in 2018 and is located on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people. The site started construction in 2016 after the UBC Board of Governors approved it and President Santa Ono announced the start of construction. This centre is built with a few purposes. The first is to provide a more accessible place on the West Coast for former student survivors, their families and communities to access the records and other historical material that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada have gathered. This allows these people to come together to discuss their experiences, history, and its effects so that they can connect and have community. The second is to provide public information for UBC students as well as students from other schools and visitors of the centre. Many people still do not know much about Indigenous people and lack knowledge of how they have shaped our country. This is a problem because without the shared knowledge about this topic to Canadians, it's difficult to make unbiased, necessary conversations and negotiations when making decisions on the progress of our society. The centre includes both a history centre as well as a dialogue centre. Inside the 6,500 square foot space holds all the physical and digital documents of the Indian residential school system pertaining to BC, as the rest are included in the University of Manitoba, which is the host campus for this. The facility is split into two levels. The lower level at the bottom of the landscape bowl will house a digital exhibit space that will also be used for public programming, teaching, and interaction with community visitors. The space will be suitable for university classes, visiting groups of primary and secondary students, community members, and other visitors. The upper level pavilion is a highly transparent space for meeting rooms, research, and administrative staff. So who are the Indigenous people exactly? In this week's reading, we learned from the United Nations and International Labour Organization that Indigenous people don't have an exact definition, but they are the following: descended from the pre-colonial, pre-invasion inhabitants of their region, maintain a close tie to their land in both their cultural and economic practices, suffer from economic and political marginalization as a minority group. Indigenous people suffer from eviction, violence, exclusion, discrimination, and disenfranchisement, leading to poverty, health issues, and the destruction of their cultures. There are 400 million Indigenous people in the world, and they hold 20% of the Earth's landmass. But that land harbors 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. More people need to learn about this. The perception that Indigenous people lack capacity not only leads to further marginalization, but it prevents us from working effectively with non-Indigenous partners and from acquiring the capital to create change for our communities. In the readings, The Zone of Canadian Aboriginal Adult Education, a social movement approach by Marlene Atleo, we also learn that adult education in Canada is a cross-cultural exercise as a consequence of globalization and for Aboriginals, fourth world realities of the colonized Indigenous people of modern nation-states in which they were dispossessed, despised, discounted, and demoralized through government policies, processes, and laws. This public can learn and know more about this because so much of our land actually belongs to these Indigenous people, yet we took it from them and not many people know about it. Approximately 150,000 Indigenous children were forced from their homes and sent to strict religious boarding schools from the 1800s to the late 1900s. The centre will also be an important reminder for Canadians. And as I've mentioned, the centre will be significant for Indigenous people to gather and share their story as well as connect with others. But it will also be significant to non-Indigenous people in the sense that it can teach them how to make formal education for the Indigenous people more welcoming, liberating, transforming, and life-affirming. In the readings, Atleo also mentions that any education, but especially adult education, must be oriented to deal with the realities of situatedness of Aboriginal people, which means that they have to understand their own situatedness to respectfully and ethically facilitate Aboriginal learning in culturally competent and pedagogically responsive ways. This means that we must educate non-Aboriginal people first and have them truly understand their history as well as what it means for the present and future before we educate the Indigenous people and to reconcile between them and Canadians. And the centre is a great place for this to take place.